In the world in which I lived by then, there was no nursery school in our area. We couldn't hear about them. Those days, you'd have basically 3 clothes. The one you use for everyday work, and then the one you keep for Sunday.
I asked some of my friends whom I knew used to go to Chevambe every weekend. I tried to describe it. They said, oh, we know that girl.
Things of this world really don't matter so much to me. Yes, I need them, but they really wouldn't take me away from God.
I was born under a mango tree, but the mango tree is since gone.
Yes, a good evening to you, our esteemed viewers. But before we go into details of today's My Story, last week we had Reverend Medad Birungi bya Yesu, and 2 important things he left us with. One is forgiving. He told us forgiveness is a wound, and each time you keep this wound at heart, that is how big the rotting will be. And then he also said, your background or what you're going through now has nothing to do with your future. Therefore, don't look at the circumstances, don't look at what surrounds you today, and use it to determine what you'll be tomorrow. But I welcome you to today's My Story. Edwin Austin Mukalas is my name. Remember, this program is exclusively on Family TV. This is where we bring you significant people and they share with us their life testimonies. It is these testimonies that keep us moving. Their testimonies encourage us. And guess who we have today? In last year's, not last year, but the previous lockdown, we had a live concert that was aired on Family TV. And this concert was organized by AYF Band, and that is Anglican Youth Fellowship Band. But have we ever taken time to think of who the music director of that band is? Of course, the music was so sweet. We enjoyed. Our eyes were fed to the maximum. And today, the person we have is the music director of the AYF Band. He's a director, not only a music director, but he's also a director of a school. I'm not wrong when I call him an educationist, because he's a proprietor of a school. But then, it is also important that in the ministry or in the body of Christ, he's a musician evangelist. He uses music to preach the gospel. But then he's a father and a husband to someone. Join me as we welcome Mr. Kasamba Peter. Mr. Kasamba, you're most welcome to today's My Story.
Thank you very much, Edwin. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be on this. I didn't know you'd pick on me one of these days because I'm used to being sort of a bit background and love my own quiet life. But real pleasure. I've been blessed by Family TV and happy to be on it today.
We want to now look into that quiet life that you want. We are delighted. Kindly greet our esteemed viewers.
Good evening, viewers. Is it good morning? Good evening, viewers. It's a real pleasure to be facing you today and sharing this moment with you. And I hope that the time we share together will be great fellowship and it will be looking into each other's lives. And you know, the Bible says iron sharpens iron. Yeah. And no man is an island. I think that's not a biblical quote, but it's still extremely true. Human beings, in fact, it says, can two walk together unless they are agreed? If two are together in a bed, they are kept warm. So us coming together, even on the media, is a wonderful thing. It always leaves us wiser and stronger.
Amen. Amen. So when I see you with this guitar, it's as if you want to give us a welcome hit.
Yes, I've spent most of my life writing songs. Actually, my big brother pointed that I started making up songs when we were still playing and running around. Before P1, I didn't realize it. He told me you were... Yes, before P1. He says, you are gifted with forming up songs. So later on, however, when I became a Christian and started writing things from my heart, then some of these songs started coming up. I'll start by singing this simple song that says, all that I am, all that I was is no longer what I am, and all I am is because of who he is, that is Jesus, because I laid my burdens in return of his glorious crown. Golden rays of the sun bouncing on the mountain tops, drizzling drops of the rain, sinking in the sand, and then all that is dust to dust comes back into life, and then all that was dead and gone, starts to dance again, because all that I was, no longer what I am, all that I am, he's because of who you are, because I lay down my burdens in return of your glorious crown, I lay down my life in return of your crown. Sunrise over the forests, hey, new life has come. Butterflies bouncing about like flowers that can fly. And then all that was black and gray, hey, starts to glow in the night. And then all that was dead and gone, hey, it's time to dance again, because all that I was, no longer what I am, all that I am, is because of who you are, because I lay down my burdens in return of your glorious crown, I lay down my life in return of your crown, I lay down my burdens in return of your glorious, I lay down my life in return of your crown.
Wow. So this was just an opener. Therefore, you should be excited for what we are going to have today. And Mr. Kasamba.
Yes, please.
Now, because you told us your talent was detected as early as P1. So, where does your life begin?
Well, my life begins in Arua. My parents were working there. My father was a post office worker in the 60s. My mother, a qualified infant teacher, very talented, musical and artistic. And my father, musical, but says he doesn't have any drop of art in him. He says, I don't know, we've never tested, because he's a clergyman. And I was born in Arua Hospital in 1965. And
a few years after independence.
Exactly, a few years after independence. And by then the place was still very tidy under sort of colonial care. So, you know, you had everything in place, including garbage collection and street lights and everything. And population was small. And I think generally my memory of childhood days, of course, in the first 4 years or so, there's not much memory. But when it was hitting 1970, my father was convinced by all the church people that he was in the wrong profession.
But then, were they natives of Arua, or they had gone there for work?
They went for work. My parents come from Nebi district, and my father is born in a place called Pulum, which is very near a place called Parombo, which is not too far from the Lake Albert, just bordering Congo so closely. In fact, recently I was discovering about 5 miles away, I would cross into Congo from where my home is. So I keep joking that I was so born, I come from so close to the Congo border that if the colonialist who drew the map had sneezed, I could have been a Congolese for all you know.
had earthquake.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. So how many were you at home?
We are 8 children, but my parents adopted 2 other boys, so we grew up as 10 altogether. And being a clergyman's home, there was always other people that were being taken care of. So there are times when we almost clocked to 20 in the house. Actually, we went to more than 20, especially during the 1980s wars, the early 80s, when people would come traveling from West Nile on the train. They would travel 3 days, and then there were very few places they could lodge. People would show up at our doorstep without warning. I remember a night when over 8 big men walked in. And I remember Mom just getting up quietly, going to the kitchen, getting all the food that was there, preparing it for them, because they had been traveling for 3 days. So that's the kind of...
Did you know them, or they were strangers?
There were possibly 1 or 2 of them were known to my father and mother. The rest would have come because of the connection they knew. But everybody needed shelter, and everybody felt it was like their duty to help, or at least in our home, that's what it was.
So you told us in 1970, is it 1970,
Yes,
when they convinced your dad that he was in a wrong profession?
It might have been like 65, but 70 I woke up and started understanding what was happening. By then, he had qualified as a clergyman from Mukwano, and he worked in Zambia barracks briefly.
Why did they say he was in a wrong profession? Because we may think he was at least earning something.
He was very loved in the post office where he was. Everybody would go straight to him to be helped because he had a pastoral attitude towards himself. He was always receiving people and helping those who come, very illiterate, to post a letter. He said in some circumstance somebody came to send a telegraph, and they knew the Mlongoti there that when you go you beat Simo, so they go with the club and start hitting it. So in Kampala where you are, come quick, your mom is very ill, bong bong. So then he would be the one who sort of reach out to those people, explain, get out the information, then send the message. And so there was that extra help attitude. Then of course at church, he was very active. He was born again, he was a believer, he loved the Lord, and everybody found him like that's where he needed to be working, not at the post office.
But I think the post office is still doing some tremendous
Definitely.
work. Now, who was going to help this? Were they not going to destroy these telephone hubs?
Indeed, when he was convinced and finally left, the post office was very, very sad. In fact, he said his boss offered him a 2 posts promotion, but it had taken him over a year to make the decision. And he had finally decided, and he was not going to turn back. That was it. So he moved to be trained.
Yeah. So, did you come to know when he was at Mukwano?
Yes, at Mukwano I started understanding. I remember Mukwano was a very beautiful, quiet place.
Did you relocate from Arua to
Yes,
Mukwano?
the whole family moved to Mukwano. We were still 3 children by then. My big brother, our firstborn sister, and I. And then the little girl who follows me was born around that time.
Now, what was your new experience? Because Arua and Mukwano looked totally different.
As a child, your whole world is your parents, and you don't see much more.
As long as you're with your parents.
Except my father's friends. I remember one of them was exceptionally tall. He was a Southern Sudanese. He was called Malau. I remember standing down and looking, and his face was blurred by the sun up. And later on, when I grew, I realized he was actually tall. He was much taller than all the other students. That when he arrived, Dad said 2 of the shortest clergymen training ran straight to greet him, and they would hug him around the knees, and everybody would cheer. And those are some of the funny stories I hear from my childhood.
So they hug him, and then
Yes.
the Nisa is...
Because I didn't know that people who are training for clergy have a good sense of humor. They have fun too. So that was part of their fun. They would play soccer. They do also. I wouldn't know the soccer because I was just a child by then. I was just learning how to understand that I'm alive anyway.
How were you coping up with life, livelihood, survival? Because dad is no longer working, he's now in school.
I think those days, I never got to know the detail, but if they took a whole family, when they took a man for clerical training, the wife was also taken for training, because the presumption is most of the time the woman might have not been educated. So they give them things of how to take care of themselves, read and write, nutritional, tailoring. So my mother was also taken in. And I think there was, I don't know, but I think there was some bursary that kept the family. So I don't remember my mother and father complaining about any financial issues. Those came when they got out to now start their work in the clergy world.
But then when do you start school?
I started school in the early 70s in Arua. Because when my father completed, he was then posted briefly to Zambia. The circumstances were not easy.
Why were they not easy?
They offered him half salary. They offered him half salary. He says that point blank, and he tried to talk to the bishop then. There was some kind of segregation, I would say.
Wait, is it that by the time you qualify, you already know how much you're going to earn?
Yes, he was a diploma holder, and that put him at a higher level with the other clergy. You know very well there are some that are certificate holders, and so you're going to serve in two different places. There's definitely a hierarchy, the way you're paid. Like, for instance, a church teacher is different from a deacon, different from a reverend, from a canon, and as you go higher, your levels are anticipated. And then besides, there are also levels of payment of different workers in Uganda then, and the church was also sort of rhyming with them.
So when they offered him half salary, he decided to go?
No, he didn't decide to go. He went and talked to the bishop then, and the bishop told him, why don't you go back where you came from? And that was a bit hard for him. So he conversed with his own bishop in West Nile. The bishop was waiting for someone of his qualification. And the very next day, the bishop sent for him. And then life started in Arua. By then, the family was so small. The whole transfer took place on a bus. We didn't even need a truck. We got on one of those UTC buses.
Didn't you have stuff, mattresses, beds, what and what to carry?
Not that much. A table maybe, a sofa set, and a bed, and the mattresses, and they could go on top of a bus.
Now you go back to Arua.
Yep.
This time when you were son of a clergy.
Yes, and I didn't even know what it meant because I was too young yet. I remember we arrived in Arua and they took us to a house which I still remember. It was next to a football field. It was in the vicinity of the diocesan headquarters in Vara. And we stayed in there for a short time, and then we moved to the new site, Vara Senior Secondary School. It was brand new houses put up by the IDA building. Very good, more modern than most houses are today, because we had water heaters with running water, cookers inside. We had these bedrooms, and the school had just been newly done. Those schools that were done all over the country at the same time, in around 69, 68 to 1970, 71. So we got into a totally new site, and it was a beautiful place to be. The whole of Arua was very tidy and very beautiful to live in.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, where do you start from when when time for school comes?
When time for school comes, my father again went and did a mature entry exam and came back to the university. So in that short time, we had to be moved to a little house that wasn't within the school. It was off Arua Hill Primary.
Why were you moved out of the house?
Because when your father is no longer working in the school for 3 years, he's come for a degree course for 3 years, he has to find a way of looking after. The government was sponsoring only him and not the family. So we had to live a tight life. Those were the early Idi Amin days. We are hearing a lot of disappearing people, so many roadblocks. Soldiers were feared.
And this time, he's the only one, this side?
Yes, he's the only one this side. Mom is with us, and Mom was going through a tough time. In those days, Mom got a few skills making samosas and mandazi. And I was one of the people who would be with those tools and a basket on the roadside, selling. I remember the first time I took the mandas to sell in school, I sold all of them for 20 cents. Because I was a kid, I didn't know how to sell. The kids just came, the first one gave me 20 cents and the rest gathered all of it. And that's what I took back to my mom, and she understood. She just laughed and taught me how to do it better.
She must have been a good mother.
I don't know how she did
Not
it.
like today's mothers. You would have woken out with some slaps.
My mom was good with the cane, but I think she knew when it applied. And her canes would arrive very suddenly before you know it is been done and it's over. Because she was stressing out with us. By that time we were 4 children. No, then the 5th was born. And then we also had the 2 adopted brothers with us already. So she was alone. She was teaching in a school. She would ride to school on a bicycle. You know, Arua is fairly flat, and ladies in Arua ride as a way of convenience living. So she would ride there and then ride back for lunch, then ride back, then come back. And in all of this, she's earning a living. She's cooking for us. At the same time, we are taking all the mandazi and selling it all for 20 cents. Those days, a kilo of meat was 1 shilling. Let me put it in context.
1 shilling?
Yes, 1 shilling.
So how would you approximate it?
20 cents was 5% of a shilling. So, yeah, that's what it is. A bottle of soda was about, I think it was 50 cents. We used to call it half a shell, half, 1 half. That's what it was. And the 20 cents was a copper coin, and then there was a 10 cents coin, then a 5 cents coin. Those are the things that would pick sweets and kabalagala by the roadside.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you've now started school?
I started school, yes. I remember I was taken to P1, and one of the most lovely teachers was
Didn't you go through kindergarten?
Kindergarten, the little bit of kindergarten I experienced was in Mukono, because they had a sort of like daycare kindergarten center for the children. In Arua, there was only 1 kindergarten, and it was in town. And taking a person there, then back forth, it would have been too much for my mom. So waited and did straight P1.
So, you told us that by P1, your brothers had already detected your talent in music.
Yes, my big brother, who was actually the musical one. Me, I wasn't that musical. You know, when a child is playing and making up little play songs, it doesn't seem like music. That's what I was doing. But my
what is it that he observed in you?
He said when we were playing, I would make up my own songs that children make. You know, those lumba say, mama lumba say, oh, yeah, me. I would make little songs that I would then sing and teach to the other friends. And then we'd play using those songs. I thought that was unserious, because for him, he was now doing a real performance, you know. He was in P2, and he sang so well that they took him to sing before the whole school town hall, the town hall. So he was actually known as a musician. For me, I was like doing background child play, really.
Were you not admiring him?
He was my superstar and still is.
Being a brother to a celebrity.
A big brother. And on top of that, he's extremely intelligent. You know, he would always lead his class. He learned how to read and was reading big books, and sometimes books that had information that wasn't good for our little
By P2?
ears. By P2, yes. He was a very, and still a very, very intelligent guy. He's got what you call a photographic brain.
He must be indeed.
Oh, yes.
So, and then P1, you're in P1 and then?
P1, yes, P1. I remember P1. We had this teacher. She's very, very pleasant lady. I still remember her. Still visit her in Entebbe when I can. She loved to call us to the front to sing, and because my father by then had bought a guitar, and he used to play it at home, and we used it for worship, and he used it also in his chaplaincy ministry. And the songs we used to sing at home, though the world has forsaken, God lives a different path, you know, and all of that song. And they are watching you, marking all you do, hearing the things you say.
Just sing it. Just sing it.
They are watching you, marking all you do, hearing the things that you say. Let them see the Savior as He shines in you. Let His power control you every day. Though the world has forsaken God, leads a different way, walks a different path, I know the Lord that the Savior trod. Then I don't remember the words there. La 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 la. They are watching you, marking all you do, hearing the things that you say. Let them see the Savior as He shines in you. Let His power control you every day. Let His power control you every day.
Well, but were you taking meaning out of those words,
no,
those songs?
It was a lot of English words. When you're a kid, though the world I forsake God, it's a different world. Those are the things I would mumbo jumbo. So the teacher would ask me to sing in front of the class, and my knees would be shaking. And I would sing anyway. And that's when I learned that what you feel is not what you go by. You go by what you know. I knew that I'm supposed to be singing a song, and if my knees can shake and not interrupt me, I'll continue singing. So I learned how to sing before little crowds at that sort of P1, P2 age in that way.
And then how did you continue with your education?
Arua Hill Primary School, that was the school. It was initially Madvani Primary School, then it was taken up when the government took over most of the private education. And my brother and my big sister were the pioneer students in that school. We came in like 3 years after. And I studied in Arua Hill Primary School from P1 to P6. And about that time also, my father finished his studies in the university and went back to teach in the same Vara Senior Secondary School. So we moved back from this almost slum neighborhood where we lived into the very nice, well-arranged, organized staff quarters of the school. And my father started his chaplaincy work in the school, which he did very well because he had a way with the students. They loved to come to him. They would even confide in him when they're going to do a strike in the school. So he would then cancel them, and he quilled a strike or two he tells me about. And they now knew him. One day, in fact, in my hearing, one of the students said, he should be a lawyer because he seems to know how to deal with things. They tell them, we're feeding very badly. Please, Reverend, is there a way you can help us talk to the administrator? So our home was always full of students. And because there was music in it, my father was playing music and he was teaching the students. My big brother took the guitar and learned it in less than a week. By then he was still in P4, P5, and he played it so well.
He must be an intelligent man.
He's actually a lecturer in the university music department. That's what he does. He travels around doing music. And he plays almost any instrument you put in his hands. Give him a week, you'll come back and find him playing it. So he took it up and learned it so well. So my father got a second guitar. And my brother taught me how to play guitar by force. Because me, I am an artist. I know my art. I love it. I knew it from the time I was a child. Because I would draw little pictures and my father would take them to the staff room and show them off. And that...
Where had you picked this inspiration from, the art inspiration?
It was just within me. It was like where children are scribbling things and I scribble mine, and it's out of the ordinary from there. So I knew that I loved what I did and I did it well, and everybody else praised it, and it was confirmed.
In other words, your natural talent was art, and then music was a forced talent.
Not exactly. I think it was there. It's there because I got to learn in later life that every human being is capable of more than one thing.
All right, let us go shortly for a commercial break, and then when we come back, we shall start from there. Yes.
As you think about the Lord just taking over your case and you are no longer in the midst of it, and he says, fear not.
Demons from the mountains, scream and leave.
In the name of
Demons
the Lord.
from the graves, scream and leave in the name of Jesus.
Welcome back from the commercial break. This is my story only on Family TV. Edwin Austin Mkalas is my name. We are with Mr. Kasamba Peter, and he's taking us through his story. Mr. Kasamba, yes. And then there is something I want to ask you. As we are introducing the story, I asked you something about how you managed to earn a living when Dad was at school, and you told us for the first time when he went for a diploma, yeah, you had no constraints, and then but you said after, yes, the hardship came in after when he was out of, yes, the university. But then you also said he complained, and that is why he requested for a transfer because of half salary. So how does then the insufficiency comes in?
You mean insufficiency in
financial insufficiency?
Well, what happened is, remember, this is 1971. In the 70s, things were okay when you worked and earned the salary. Around 1960 something, 70, when you qualified, you were all right. You could even go and get a car on mortgage, you know. The companies were here, the VWs and the Anglias, and they were ready to give you a car just on the power of your salary. But as soon as it hit 1971, because Dad, when he got transferred to Arua, they put him on a good job with a good income, a good house. We're living in a good, comfortable setting. And we started off well. Then when he came back to the university, then Idi Amin's ruckus began, because Idi Amin had done his coup just about 1970-71, and then inflation, hyperinflation began. Salaries stayed the same. First of all, he started by declaring what he called the economic war, and then he started the fight against all the Indians, the rest of the Indians and the European countries, and we started getting embargoes on Uganda. Inflation went up. And when Amin, I think, was it in 72, when he drove the Indians and gave them 90 days to leave, they were the one running all the businesses, all the factories, and Africans were not yet quite ready to grab it straight. So things got very, very tough, because when things disappeared, for instance, sugar, salt, what they call essential commodities, soap, shoes, you know, when all these things disappeared, then the cost plummeted. When Amin ordered the cost must stay the same, they disappeared and went into black market. So when they went into black market, you wouldn't find sugar except if you had 10 times the price to pick it from somewhere. So, and in fact, around 1972, we forgot about sugar. We tried pounding sugar cane and add to the hot water, and it was very cumbersome, and the result was a lot of work before you get a peeping sweetness. So we soon got used to eating sweet potato with your black tea. That would work as the sugar. And things like shoes, I remember. The shoes used to be supplied by the Bata shoe shop, and they were all over towns in Uganda. But the supply failed. I remember my dad going to town, lining up at the Bata shop with so many fathers, waiting on the truck is going to be offloaded, and everybody waits. Once it's open, everybody floods in, grabs the nearest shoes they can get, then start seeing.
Irrespective of the size you're taking.
Size or gender. Because you have your children, you don't have a choice. So you keep looking, hoping that you can barter with someone who has what you need and they need yours. So after a few rounds of that, people just gave up. So our childhood days became a normal barefoot day. we walked on thorns, stones, anything, ran around barefooted, and we became very healthy, natural African kids.
Especially in such a time when we are in a week where we celebrated the Day of the African Child.
Given that circumstance, you can imagine my mom struggling to look after us on a teacher's salary with inflation rates going up. So she lived a very stressed life sometimes. I could remember her really trying to work hard, and Dad would come back once in a while. It seemed for us, as children, it seemed once in a while, but I know he would come back as regularly as he could, because sometimes we'd wake up in the morning and realize he arrived on the night bus for the weekend, asleep. Yes, and we'd be very excited. And the same way he arrived on a night bus, he disappears on the Sunday night bus to go catch his lectures. And that was a 3-year period of time, which ended around 74.
So, in all your primary level, What are some of the memories that you can never forget?
A lot of it is to do with security issues and the fun, because Arua was a beautiful, large place with big grass lawns, what looked like that golf course there. Covered Arua in all around the senior quarters and stretching towards where our school was. And they had big mango trees. So there was free mango trees, and there's a forest next to it. So there would be monkeys out on the mango trees and would be on the other side of the mango trees. We had that life that was very, very beautiful. As a
natural
child,
life.
yes, you want a long place to run in. That's one thing. The other was to do with the things that wound about with Idi Amin. I remember one time we were traveling to the village. We were on a bus, and we came upon a roadblock. Those who might be old enough will remember the American short jeeps. They're short and they're open on top, and they'll be loaded with military police normally with their starched khaki shorts and red belts and caps on top, and then their red bands on the caps. And on the jeep was a machine gun that had holes on the barrel. And these guys would be riding very fast and the nose is up, but this time they're patched in a roadblock in a place called Vura when you're coming out of Arua. And they were checking. I later on got to know that roadblock as a beard roadblock. I think it wasn't solely for checking for beards, but it turns out at that time Amin had ordered that nobody shall have a beard. Because recently I heard that the explanation was there are some people who vowed they would never cut off their beard until Obote was back. So maybe that was the reason why this was. But anyway, they check in the bus, and there was this one man who had a massive beard, almost like wearing a beard on behalf of the whole bus, you know. He said, "What? You have refused to obey the president. You want to overthrow the government. What not, what not?" They kick him, they slap him, they punch him, they drag him, and they throw him out of the door of the bus all the way to the ground and almost kick him before he reached there. You know, I'm only about 6 years old, and I'm seeing this going back and forth. And before long, he's now there dripping with blood, and they're holding him on both sides and dragging his legs around. And they pick his pocket and pick some coins and go and buy a bottle of beer from across the road, break it on a stone, and use it for shaving him. And we're seeing blood coming out. Then they throw him on the jeep and drive off with him. And most of the times when I was a child, when that happened, you never saw the person again alive. You might not even see the body, or you see the body without a head. So that's something I witnessed as a boy. I remember one of my uncles the stories, he was beaten also like that, but put under the tarpaulin and stabbed the bayonet. And his body was picked on one of those hills around what is Bondo Barracks in West Nile. Those are the things, those are the memories that are also very strong. And also the fear. One of the memories I will not forget easily was the time when the Entebbe raid happened. You know, it was against the law to be listening to BBC, so Dad would put it under the bed, the radio, and listen to it at very low volumes.
Why was it against the law? It was...
But those are imperialists, and they're colonialists, and they're the ones who are... The economic war is against them, and by that time, Idi Amin had declared himself conqueror of the British Empire. That was one of his titles. CBE was the abbreviation. Idi Amin, Al-Haji, Dr. Field Marshal, DSOMC, CBE, whatever. Before they read his name, they had to read all his titles. It was a rule. So if you guys who are presenting news are reading it, you'd have to read a whole paragraph before you read Dr. Al-Haji Idi Amin Dada. That was it. So that time, I remember Dad saying, they have hijacked a plane, and now they have brought it to Entebbe. He says, there's a woman who seems to have been taken away. Then one day he comes out laughing. He says, you can't believe it. The Israelis came in last night and took their people and shot at our MiGs and damaged our planes. So, you know, these are things you could laugh at quietly, but not aloud, because there was always spies outside your door as well. One time
not even discussing such issues in public.
No, public was totally out of the question. You'd possibly be carried and thrown in a boot and taken off. Now, one time we're having supper. This time we're now back in Varasinia, and in this good government house with glass windows. You know, our own house had timber windows, solid, you couldn't see what's out. And then Dad says, cigarettes, I smell cigarettes. Nobody ever smoked in our house. Who is smoking here? And someone gets up in a hurry and hits his head hard on the window that was open. Ding! Said, sorry. And then we heard his footsteps running. Now, you always had people listening. So when someone is picked up the next day, possibly they have heard you say something against him, not even to say I'm going to overthrow him. Just something against him. And that would cost you your life.
So after P7?
Actually, between P5, around P4 there, P6, P5, my brother taught me how to play guitar.
Forcefully?
Yes, forcefully. And we used to play in the Sunday school choir, our Sunday school choir from All Saints Church. No, St. Philip's Church in Arua was like the model Sunday school because it had these kids who could play guitar, would sing modern music. And my brother being
What do you mean by modern music?
Oh, this, what is it? I haven't sung this in about 40 years. Hallelujah, everybody let your praises ring. Hallelujah, everybody sing Hosanna to the King. Hallelujah, all the people sing aloud with joy today. Hallelujah, all the people, for the Lord is here to stay. He is Lord and everlasting Lord, the one who created everything. I wonder is he, and my, he loves us so. He loves us so. Hallelujah, everybody sing Hosanna to the King. That's one of the songs that we're taught.
Now, who was teaching you these modern songs?
He was called Dr. Lulua. He was our Sunday school teacher and a superstar for us. He was studying in the university, but he had this modern mind, and he had a deep, rich heart, a born-again man who loved children. Wherever he was, children were around him. And he would come pick modern music and bring it back to us. So our Sunday school, while others are singing local songs, we're playing
Like
guitar
which
and
song?
singing
Like
this.
which local song?
Oh, they are very beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But by then, people thought that anything. Let me see which one. For instance, Come Elohim, Ha Bilobedo, Kaya Leka, Elohim, Ha Bilobeko Bachen Cheken. Lembe pa Mungu mitbi mandanda, sago lembe mange cheke majo winjo. Kristo ebedo tar sago po, ene jampor ni jo pare walo toke kaya leka. Metelowi bi ha belobedo. Kaya leka metelowi abilubeko basheng sheke.
Wow.
That's an Alur hymn, and it was sung in the church called Awindiri that used to sing in my language. And among them was late Tom Duku, who went to be with the Lord about a few weeks ago. He was one of the people in that choir. And when I sing this, I remember him. But he was also one of the boys in our primary school, walking around barefooted and making nice noise, cheeky guys, with my big brother.
What do you mean by nice noise?
Well, when boys talk funny things, when they sing songs, when they just being boys after school in the evening. When I remember it, it's like a very optimistic sound and life. Yeah.
Okay, so your brother has taught you a guitar, and then you're in this, yeah?
Yes.
You're in a modern Sunday school.
Yes, barefooted and poor, but we had...
You're happy?
Yes, we're happy and we're doing very well. Our Sunday school was great. They taught us good, beautiful songs and lessons. And because we had earned a certain fame, we were invited to birthday parties and we take our barefoot and
To sing on.
to sing, yes. Town people who wanted a singing children group in their birthday. And for the rest of us never commemorated our birthdays. It was good just to be alive. But other rich business people in town, they used to call them mafuta mingi. You know, I mean, days, the rich guys in town were called mafuta mingi. Business people normally who did the business, they called magendo, which was the black market things, yes, smuggling and all bringing things and selling and getting good money. So they had a good means of living.
Were you being paid for singing?
No, we were not paid for singing. The only thing I was paid for doing was I was very good at making toy cars out of sorghum stem. So I'd sell it to the children who had a little money than me, and that's when I would have a little bit of pocket money. So that's when I would earn a bit of money.
Okay. So, how about your secondary life?
Well, let's say, just before Amin fell, if we take it back, my father was appointed and invited to apply for the job for chaplains in Makerere University in 1978. 1978, he thought about it, prayed about it. He actually did not want to come back this way, but he eventually accepted.
Because of the other history.
Yes, it was, I'll tell you, it's not a lie. There was a lot of segregation those days. And I eventually had to meet the brand of it. Just being a northerner in here meant that you're first of all hated because you'd gotten rid of part of the people that got rid of the Buganda kingdom. Then there was a big sense of superiority complex among the people here about the people from the north. They felt by virtue of birth and tribe they were hence superior. So, and you know, when people are so assured about what they think, they don't even feel the politeness to hide it from you. They give it to you the way you are. And that's not good for a child because it drums you down in a very difficult way. So I think my parents had experienced that. They didn't want to experience it again. But nevertheless, they said, well, when God calls you, you don't go to the place of comfort, but to the place where service needs to be done. So they came. Dad came earlier on, prepared a place, picked us up. You know, it was going to be the longest journey I'd made. We had made journeys of 100 kilometers from Arua to my village where I come from. Now we are getting on a truck, and it was going to take us a whole day.
This time not a bus?
Not a bus, because we were traveling with... Now the house had chairs and beds and things, and so they would fill a truck and we'd sit in the back. Mom and Dad would sit on the co-driver's seat in front. And we set off, long journey. After roadblocks, after bumpy roads, we got to the game park, looked at the animals, crossed Karuma Falls. You know, when you're coming this way, you cross the Nile twice. Yeah. And when you're a child, just crossing a bridge is a thriller. Then looking at all the hills passing by, the landscape. I've always been thrilled by landscape. I thought I would outgrow it.
Were you not excited coming to Kampala?
Totally excited.
Had you ever dreamt of being in Kampala?
My memories as a child, I'd never really given it a thought, but we used to know that Kampala is a big, beautiful place, and now we are going to it. And this time it wasn't a story, it was coming true. We are now on the track. Because sometimes they say you might go to Kampala, then it doesn't happen. I think every child has that thing they hope for and doesn't happen. Like when you go looking for visas and it's not given, you know. So here we were. We boarded that truck. I remember getting to Karuma, then across, then it started raining, so they put on the tarpaulin. So we traveled like things in a sack, basically, until we hit Tarmac Road and it became very smooth, and finally we started back and forth, and we knew that we now reached more or less where we are going, and we had entered Makerere through the east gate, going over humps, and then they opened, and there was this big, beautiful, storied house. We'd never lived in one before. The university was so neat and so big, and such a big system. First impressions were really fantastic, and life there was at another level. When you come from a faraway town to the capital city, to the top university, every cream of the nation is there, and they were there.
Now, how did you feel? How did you feel? Like a young child, you're now going to reside in the university, you're in the capital city.
Totally thrilled and excited. And it started beautifully. I was looking forward to everything going to be perfect. And my father took me to the church, which is chaplain too. And I'd never seen a church as well done as that. The floor was polished by then. It had candles up front. It had all these ceremonies that high church used to have, more or less, except for the censers. And they had a choir that would come in procession, and then they would light the candle, and there was a pipe organ. Arua, there were no pianos and organs in the church. And everybody was speaking from such high and mighty places. Even someone taking a reading, he might be a professor or a doctor, so and so. So he clears his throat and arranges himself. And I remember the first sermon in that chapel, I didn't understand a thing, and I told my dad, I think here we'll never understand the sermon. He said, no, that's not just you. Today's man preached above everybody's heads, including his own. And that was some of the...
Was it a way of consoling you?
No, he was telling the truth. Later on, I got to know that this is one of those PhD holders who delves into controversy whenever they have to talk. So they're there, people who know so much that you get them better when you read their writings than when you listen to them talk. So they have a lot of information, and they're always comparing different levels of information to us. So at the end, what they tell you become a smaller thing than all the comparisons they have thrown into your face.
So, meaning you are now going for your secondary in Kampala?
No, I was still in P6.
Oh, not yet?
Not yet, P7. So then they took me to a school. I won't say the name because I might be bad-mouthing it. The name was very big, and I was looking forward to it because I thought, if Makerere University is like this, what will the school be like? But it turned out the only school that had a vacancy at the time was way, way lower in standard and scales than the school I'd left in Arua. And they were very, very good with the cane. And they taught mainly in Luganda, which I had hardly ever had. So I landed in the midst of people who called me an animal. The first day I was caned in front of the whole school for so-called fighting for posho, and I was pushed into the saucepan. So first day in school was like one thing that was going to determine what's in my heart for the next number of years. Because everybody made it clear that they hated you and where you came from and despised you. And the teacher canes you before the whole school, talking to you in Luganda, which you don't understand. And the school where I was, it was a rule that you don't cane a new student for a period of time. You first settle them. So there was that humaneness. And the fact that I didn't have shoes on meant they despised me from the start. And then, of course, being darker skinned than the rest also meant that, there he is. And that
you could easily be spotted.
Yes, so there was no pretending. You know, when you're small and you don't want to be seen, but yet you know now you're very conspicuous, and that was the situation. And I remember sitting on a rock looking at Kampala with tears running by themselves freely, because being humiliated like that is not good for an 11-year-old. It's 10, 11-year-old. It's a very, very difficult place.
It was indeed a bad experience.
Yes, and there it was very, very cold. So you have the cold, you have then people laughing at you as they pass by. And I remember I had no friends except one guy who is a very little guy, you know, one of these nerds who people don't want to deal with. So he became my friend. But his way of being a friend is also to converse with me and tell me how superior his culture is to mine. And because he was the only one available, yes, and we got to enjoy each other's company. It wasn't a perfect friendship, but it was a good one. We had our good time there. And then this school made sure at every Saturday, what they called coaching was a test in all the 3 different subjects. And Monday was a day when the results came out, and so you were caned for what you got in marks. So there would be a pass mark, and below it, 1 mark below it, if it was a subject like they assumed should be easy, like English, 1 mark below it was a cane. In maths, maybe 2 marks below it is a cane. So if you calculate, you got 50%. You're really entitled to about 30 canes, isn't it? And sometimes they would keep that record. If they didn't finish it today, they store it for the next day. So the whole of Monday, the whole P7 and P6 would be yelling and hollowing. They would be caning. First math lesson come in the morning. They caned for the whole triple subject. After break, English. After lunch, GP. So you go home when you're all sore behind. And with time, we got to develop a thick skin on the bottom with the boys, because you'd stand and they would cane you, and you look at the teacher and not touch, and you have 40 canes here. That was one of my toughest moments in life as a child. I did up to P7. 1979, the war came and Amin was driven out, and our exams were interrupted the same way COVID has done so now. Then after that, we went back. I don't remember whether we did the P7 later, but from that time on, results now used to come in later, and the next class S1 would begin like second term or so. Results were not good because I'd studied for a year or two without understanding what they were teaching in Uganda. I went to Bat Valley Primary School. Bat Valley Primary School was a good place for me, because there I think I went...
Were you going to repeat the class?
I went to repeat P7. I saw it and I told myself, I've done nothing for a year and a half. I need to at least redo P7. So that set me back by almost 2 years. So I went there, and in Bat Valley Primary School, I didn't bother to make friends. I had got to my brother's habit of reading books and novels, and I think if you hear me eloquent in English, a lot of it is to come from reading piles upon piles of books, and I got addicted to novels. And I would have my book when people were making noise, and Bat Valley was an inner city school. Students would come and do all sorts of reggae there. I can remember when there's no teacher, someone could throw a desk from the back to the front. Everybody ducks, and it's normal. And another replies. And and every week almost, a parent would follow their child to school and check their bag and find either stolen clocks or money or whatever, a wallet, and then cane them like a snake in front of the whole school. So there were very, very crazy students in there, and the school had to be handled in a tough way. And in the midst of that, I'd learned how to live my own peaceful life. I would be reading my book in a corner while people are throwing desks. I'd be doing my own things, and I did Bat Valley, finished it nice.
What about the music? Were you still singing and playing
I was
the
now
guitar?
playing guitar. You see, when we moved to Kampala, I found my place in St. Francis Sunday School. And in St. Francis Sunday School, we had our teacher, the wife of the former dean. What was her name? How can I forget? I should remember it before the program ends. She's a very, very nice lady. She took us in, and together with the other teachers, they looked after us, and I found the Sunday school very beautiful. The kids were extra intelligent, and so performance, drama. I remember the first Christmas play, Kyuguru, yes, Mrs. Kyuguru, Joy Kyuguru. And then there were other teachers around also whose names.
So you're talking about Joyce Kyuguru?
The mother.
The mother or the
mother,
wife?
The wife of Mr. Kyuguru, the dean.
Yes.
She was a tall, brown woman, and she was very nice with the children. She was a far cry from the caning we were getting in school. And she was like a place of solace. And there, I found that the little songs I could write became useful. Because then I found there was no Sunday school choir. I suggested, why don't we form a Sunday school choir? They possibly did not know how it works, but because we had had one in Arua, it crowded children. I was still sort of a Sunday school child myself, but older than the rest. So we formed this choir and started singing. Then I started making up my own songs.
What is one of those songs that you made?
This was for Sunday school competition, and they taught us the theme of that year. The plagues in Egypt, Joseph. King of Egypt had a dream that troubled him so much. He searched around everywhere for an interpretation, and at last he found a man who would interpret his dream. The man was a prisoner brought from another land. Joseph was the name of the man. It's not I but God who'll interpret your dream. I'll speak his words to you, and he'll know he's great. It's not I but God who'll interpret your dream. I'll speak his words to you, and you'll know he's great. then someone else would come and he's the king. I dreamt that there were 7 cows, so fat and quite so nice. Then 7 cows, very thin with bones sticking out, came out and swallowed them but didn't show a change. And 7 years of full-grown corn swallowed by the sprouted corn. Would you tell me what this would mean? Then Joseph, it's not I but God who'll interpret your dream. I'll speak his words to you and you'll know he's great. It's not I but God who'll interpret your dream. I'll speak his words to you and you'll know he's great. I haven't sung this song for about 35 or 40 years. So
Wow.
I'm surprised I've remembered these words. And there was a third verse where now Joseph comes and interprets. So that was sung for us. I composed that for a Sunday school competition.
You must have been so creative.
I was, and I didn't know I was. I was just doing what came to me naturally. And I remember we took the Sunday school there and we won everything, hands down. And
after winning,
yes.
This is a new choir. You've now won, and then you're now coming back.
Oh yes, and I remember in Makerere we were lucky. The university had a bus; it would pick us up, and so we'd come back singing on the bus, and we were good. We were family. The university staff were few, and they were all staff members who were having children, and their children were in church. And then also we played around together, so we knew each other. Up to now, when I meet our age mates, it's like I meet my own brothers and sisters.
So, this time round when you sit for exams from Bativari, do you pass?
I passed, yes. I got
And
my
you qualified to
first
go to secondary?
Yes, and I went to the nearest, possibly most affordable school.
Well, and Mr. Kasamba, at that very point is where I want us to start from next week when we meet. I believe you'll still give us time to complete this story. Thank you so much, you who started with us. This is my story. This is Mr. Kasamba Peter, and his story is so interesting. You shouldn't miss it next week. We shall, of course, come back with him next week. But for us today, before we sign out, I want to also remind you, please, COVID is real. Therefore, it's your responsibility to stop the spread. How do we stop the spread? By sanitizing, by washing our hands, and putting on our masks anytime when we are moving out of our houses. By that, we shall stop the spread, and we shall smile again. Edwin Austin Mukalas is my name. This is my story. I've worked with Jonah Jal, the producer, Bantam in transmission, and Tony Santo on social media. Good night. We meet again next Sunday.